Lead Girl, the BWEL Podcast is your dedicated platform for amplifying the voices of Black women in various roles, whether you're a teacher, school leader, higher educational professional, or educational consultant.
Join us as we honor the stories of remarkable Black women and share insights from our distinctive journeys in education and life.
Tune in as we explore the topics that resonate with us as women, as members of the Black community, and champions in education. Welcome to Lead Girl, the BWEL Podcast, where we amplify the voices of Black women in educational leadership.
We are your hosts, Trelane
and Jocelyn.
Good evening, Jocelyn. How are you?
Oh, I am excited. We are live, and I see we have people who are joining us on right now. So I'm like super pumped to really share and continue to amplify our voices, all over. So I'm super excited to be here today.
We have been talking about this for so long, so I'm so happy that we are finally here, and we have some amazing educational leaders here with us today. All right, let's get into it and get to know who we have joining us today. So our first guest is Dr. Sharon H. Porter. She is an elementary principal in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. She has served in several capacities in public education over the past 30 years. She has successfully spearheaded and transformative initiatives and fostering cultures of innovation for student and organizational success. Dr. Porter is also a best-selling author and publisher and podcast host. She is currently serving as the NASESP Diversity Fellow. Welcome, Dr. Porter.
Thank you. So excited to be here. Thank you.
We also have with us Tasha Clater-Steele. Tasha is a compassionate leader and director of human and civil rights at the Virginia Education Association with over 20 years in pre-K to 12 education. She leads with love and justice to advance equity, inclusion, and social change in education. A contributing author and educator, she is currently pursuing her doctorate in education at Virginia State University. Tasha is a proud mother whose adult sons continue to inspire her relentless commitment to education justice. Welcome, Tasha.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, we heard a little bit about you guys in your bio, but, tell us a little bit more about where you are in the world of education and describe for us your journey into education and leadership. And so we'll start with you, Dr. Sharon.
Okay, great. Thank you. And again, thank you for having me. 30 plus years in public education, over 15 years in educational leadership. That's at the schoolhouse as well as central office. I've been in 3 school districts, 2 in North Carolina, 1 in Maryland, principals in 2. I've served at the elementary level as well as the middle school level at the schoolhouse, but at the central office level, I've served at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, as a leadership development coach, as well as a regional instructional specialist. So just really excited about education, where I am now. I'm currently in my first year at a new school. I think this is my 5th or 6th school, but this is my first year at this school. So it's like, honestly, starting all over. So this is where I am, excited. I am in the state of Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C.
Awesome. What about you, Tasha?
Yes, so I started my career in education as a school counselor. Spent many years as a school counselor, and I truly enjoyed that time. I felt that fire you get when there's more. And I, again, was always so passionate about education and meeting the needs of students and educators. And it was at the intersection, actually, of going back to school to get my degree in administration and leadership, where I was at my first Title I school. And that, you talk about a fire that was lit. It was my purpose, I feel like, in the education space was heavily rooted in the equity work at that time. And also not only the equity work for our students, but what I also realized, my eyes were also wide open to the experiences our educators have in those spaces. And so going into leadership, I left the role of school counseling and was a school counselor supervisor in a district. And then because of my passion for the equity work, I became the executive director of equity and school counseling, which was a wonderful experience. In that role, I was able to open like the inaugural program for trauma informed, also for family and community support and services, and was able to bring in additional social workers for our students in our schools that needed them the most. And so I'm currently serving as the Director of Human and Civil Rights at the Virginia Education Association, where I am able to take the equity work, the equity lens, and really support educators and really help them find their voice and empower them, give them the tools and resources to be successful in those spaces for themselves, but also to hand off that advocacy work to their students.
I love that. I love hearing all of that. I also am passionate about equity in terms of how it's experienced by our educators as well, right? Because if they are in spaces where they are able to advocate for equity for our students, then they're also able to do that for themselves. So I really appreciate that. So we're here on the BWEL podcast, lead girl, the BWEL podcast. But we want to sort of give some honor to BWEL, our organization, Black Women Educational Leaders Incorporated. So I first wanted to just ask, how did you learn about BWEL and what inspired you to join? Dr. Sharon, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think. Way back when BWEL was formed, I think the founder, Dr. Younger, I think how I learned about it. First of all, she was in one of my collaboration books. And when the organization began, I jumped right in and was fortunate enough to be selected as the founding secretary of BWEL, and just really believing in the mission, of bringing together these women to address all of the issues that concern us as Black women educational leaders. So it was really, I think, the connection with Ms. Dr. Younger, and just then believing in the mission that I just jumped right in and took office and tried to work alongside the wonderful executive board and getting this work out for Black women educational leaders.
Yes, it was a time getting to be the founding officers of the organization at that time when I was vice president. So that was great. How about you, Tasha? How did you learn about BWEL?
So I learned about BWEL on LinkedIn, actually, and it caused me to go in and just look around and see all the wonderful things that were happening, and also looking at some of the women who were members and just remembering, like, wow, I want to be part of this. It is so rare that Black women educators have a space that is curated for us, specifically for us, by us. And I feel like we have, as Black women educators, we have unique experiences that, that only we have. And it's important for us to have these spaces, these safe spaces where we can support one another, where we can uplift one another, encourage one another, provide the professional learning and all the things that we know that we need specifically for Black women educators. And to agree with Dr. Porter, the mission and vision, all of those things also greatly aligned with who I am as a leader and where I feel like I'm going.
Ooh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, our topic today is love and equity in schools. And so talk to us about what it means to you and how do you see it playing out in schools today? Dr. Sharon?
Well, I feel like love and equity really goes hand in hand. I think love and education doesn't mean or isn't just about the care and the kindness that you have, but it's truly about the deep commitment to every child's success. And we want to see their potential in ensuring that they feel valued, that they feel respected, and also included. I think that's very important. Equity is the way we operate, right? We operationalize that love by removing those barriers and meeting students where they are, meeting them at their individual needs. As educational leaders, we want to create a culture where all students have access to the resources and the opportunities that they deserve. And so I really believe that when love and equity are at the center of a school's culture, we see those things like inclusive classrooms. We see high expectations for every student when we support them. We see culturally responsive teaching. I think that's so important. And also policies that address those systemic inequities. I think when you have love and equity, you build those strong relationships between the families and the educators and students, and you build that on trust. And love and equity means understanding as well, because I think it was mentioned before, they're all varying needs. And so it's addressing the needs. And so I think that you can lead with good intentions for love and equity. And so without equity, without love, then it just becomes compliant, I think, just a check. So you bring them together and we create everything that we need for our scholars.
Yeah. How about you, Tasha?
Absolutely. So Dr. Cornell West has a quote that says, "You can't lead the people if you don't love the people." And that has always been at my core, right? And so it's important for me to love the people that I lead. It's also challenging to help people as leaders if we don't serve them, right? And so that space of loving them and serving them, you have to know what their specific needs are. You have to know who they are as individuals. You have to, I mean, all of these things make up what it takes to love, right? Understanding, first of all, just at the core that these are human beings, right? And so being able to apply that lens of loving and serving another human being, and also, again, understanding what those needs are, and meeting everyone, students and educators, where they are, and applying the equity lens around all the things that Dr. Dr. Porter talked about, around accessibility, around, the list is long. When we think about our multilingual learners, we think about cultural responsive teaching, all the things that we know help our students be more successful or help them thrive. And then also, again, the things that our educators need that help them thrive as well, so they can meet those needs of our students. And so we have to, that comes from, for me, that comes from a place of love. That's what drives me to show up every single day. Because in my opinion, in the absence of love and equity, are we just showing up to get a paycheck, right? You have to love the people that you serve.
Something that you said, Tasha, resonated with me in terms of, knowing the people that you serve. And I'm just curious about, like, what are some strategies or ways that you have found that have been effective to get to know the people that you're serving? Is that something that I really try to work on in my leadership?
That's a really good question. So in the schools, directly when you're talking about children, it's important to first, before school even starts, right? There are things you can do as far as like looking at the student's file, the record, getting to know a little bit about their background and who they are. Also learning more about students' families, right? Having them write about exercises and different things. And then having those one-to-ones, not just taking that assignment and then having the student just, you give them a grade and they walk away and you've learned that. So actually reading them and then having one-to-ones with students around, maybe there's something that connected with you, or maybe there's something that you want to learn more about. But also with with adult educators, when working with them, I've learned that one-to-ones with them also work well. Having coffee chats with them work well. Taking the time to be intentional about doing that is really important. And I know we get so busy, we get caught up in, all the things that we have to do on a daily basis, but being intentional about having those conversations. But one-to-ones are really good. And just being intentional and scheduling that time.
And I love that. I love that. I do that too. And I was actually, we were in a book project together, and that's something that I talked about in my chapter. It's just how important it is for educator growth, for us as leaders to get to know the people that we are leading so that they can do the things that we want them to do. So it's really being intentional about that time. But at times there are barriers to this, right? And so what are some barriers that you have either experienced or seen, especially for Black and Brown children and other marginalized groups, barriers to achieve equity and true sense of love in schools?
I'll jump
Dr.
in.
Sharon?
So one of the major barriers that I see is systemic underfunding. And that really, it's really strange because where I am in the world, I am in a predominantly African American school district county. And so we have levels. So even in different parts of our school district, you will see different funding issues, different resources, fewer resources, more resources, outdated materials. You wouldn't think that. But that's one of the barriers that I see, because we're still, even in a predominantly African American school district, there's still implicit bias. There's still things that would go on if you were thinking against other races, right? Whether the implicit bias is whether in disciplinary policies, in your gifted and talented programs, or even how students are encouraged to pursue higher education. I'm in the elementary setting, but I also work with middle school and high schools through my sorority. And so depending on where students go to school, I can almost tell based on what I perceive that they've been encouraged to do. And that shouldn't be. And I believe that we still lack diverse educators and leaders. We know that representation matters. Like, we know that students need to see themselves reflected in their teachers and in their administrators. I'll go back. In my predominantly African American setting, we have a growing population of Latino and Hispanic students, but our leadership does not reflect that. We're making an effort to do that. And so I think all Black and Brown students should see themselves in their teachers and their administrators. It can impact them having their sense of belonging and even their expectations for success.
So Dr. Porter hit several of the points that I was going to hit, but I will layer on that to say, yes, funding. Our schools need to be fully funded. Public schools, especially, get a bad rep for not delivering, but we're literally begging to fully fund our schools, right? There are so many programs that need to be funded, so many things that we can do by way of equity if we had more funding. And the other piece was definitely around educators of color. Having access to quality educators of color is so important for our students to be able to have what they need to thrive. There are studies that tell us that when students have at least one educator of color, that it increases their chances of being successful after high school. And so that's one other item. And I'll also add standardized testing. Standardized testing, the way that students are tested now, and having classroom teachers who are under a lot of pressure to teach to the test and for their children to perform a certain way, that is a barrier to true equity in the classrooms. Also, for districts or for schools where people are educators are not, they don't have the capacity, or it's not part of the work to engage with families, that is a barrier. Because again, you have to know your students. And part of knowing your students is connecting with those families, understanding who is your student outside of school, and more about the parent's ability to support the child outside of school. Maybe they're working 2 jobs, or maybe, a parent is, there are different scenarios that can be in place that can create barriers if our educators do not know our children. And then lastly, I will say, well, I guess part of this is around funding, but I know when I was executive director of counseling and equity, I was able to bring in school social workers to our elementary schools that needed the additional support. And that having that additional support really did help temper some of the issues that families were seeing in the community, so that they could have what they needed to be more focused on what was happening in school. And the last piece that I'll add is school counselors doing school testing. School counselors should be in place to help students. There are so many things that school counselors have information about, can lay their eyes on. When it comes to what a child needs, school counseling is rooted in equity. But when school counselors are spread thin and they are out doing testing, which they should not be doing, that takes away their ability to really focus on a child and determine what those needs are and communicate that to educators and the child's family.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I want to even extend it a little bit more of having equity within a school building itself, because you guys know I'm more on the technology side. So I think about how we're leading in innovation in today's digital age, and how we have some teachers who may be more comfortable with leveraging technology in a certain capacity. We have some that may not be, or keen to try new ideas, new concepts within even a school building or within a zip code, or being equitable and intentional about some of the practices that we're implementing across the building. And I know with the teacher shortage right now, it's even more so, of a thing to have experienced teachers to be able to deliver the pedagogical practices to support students. But sometimes I see if our leadership isn't leading with innovation and building a culture of innovation, that also, I think, can cause inequities even within the instructional practices across the school building. So with that said, can you both share a time when you had to advocate for equity in your role as an educational leader? Dr. Sharon?
Absolutely. As an elementary principal, I think about advocating for students with autism. I take that very seriously. Often when we hear about equity issues, you really only hear about race, ethnicity, or gender. But equity also involves our students with disabilities. And so I think one experience I'm thinking of really stands out for me. It involved a young student with autism who was struggling in a traditional classroom setting. And the student, of course, was bright. He was eager to learn, but he faced challenges with sensory overload and even communication. And that often led to frustration and disengagement. So it was very difficult, for the classroom teacher, for that student, and even for the other students in the classroom. And so after reviewing that situation, I really realized that our approach wasn't fully meeting his needs. And so I truly advocated for a more inclusive and flexible learning environment. And, we worked with the special education team, the teachers, the student's family, to develop a more personalized support plan. And this included sensory-friendly classroom modifications, providing additional staff training on autism inclusive teaching strategies, and even creating a quiet space, a calming space, where the student could self-regulate when he was overwhelmed. So, pushing for professional development for all teachers, I think is important in that situation, so that they can understand how to support students with those with autism or any neuro diversity. Actually, we worked on educating peers about neurodiversity to foster a more inclusive school culture. And that's basically just to let everyone know and recognize that people process, they think, they learn in different ways. And it's okay. But we have to meet them where they are. And I think that's a pure example of equity, giving students what they need and not giving all students the same thing.
Oh, I love that. That one hit home for me because, my son is autistic. And so, he's 21 now, but I just think about just me as a parent and just some of the experiences that teachers had with trying to support and help support him develop. Luckily, I'm so happy to say he's in college now and he's working on his bachelor's degree, but, still needs support in that. And even in the post-secondary world, I think there's a lack in that and how to support kids that have or personalized learning or have different needs or just being able to meet students where they are because there's still a struggle there because especially he does it virtual now. So it's even a little bit harder to have that communication with the teachers. But I love that you brought that up. That's, that, for me, it was a personal touch because that's something I had to deal with the last 21 years. So I completely understand and definitely want to advocate for equity and inclusivity in learning spaces and personalized instruction for sure. How about you, Tasha?
Yes, I've done a lot of advocacy around equity, and I'm going to take a different spin on this one. Some of the equity work that I've done has also been around the hiring process, right, as a leader. And so what that looks like is being intentional about where we have our fairs. If we're always going to one particular school or type of school where the diversity is low, the diversity in their education programs is low, then we know that we're not going to have many diverse candidates. And so it really expanding where we are looking at our what schools we're going to and how we are searching for candidates. So that looks like making sure we're including our HBCUs and our historically Black colleges and universities in those searches. Having partnerships with those HBCUs. So that they know that, who we are. And I mean, even tapping in with them and doing mock interviews and helping the students become prepared in those education programs. Also, part of what that looks like is with the interview process, having a diverse interview panel when those interviews are taking place. But prior to the interviews taking place, the interview panel having to go through anti-bias training. And make sure that everybody is on the same page as far as that goes. And then once you get people to your district, when you have a diverse representation to your district, what does that support look like? Because if we bring them and we have done the work to get them there, but we're not supporting them where they are and helping them be successful, then we really haven't done our jobs. So that is one of the ways that I have advocated. I have really pushed some of the work that I just talked about in the hiring process for educators of color.
So much of that. You see me nodding my head. I'm like, that too. I'm like, oh, so much of that stuff I have either tried to do in my own leadership and at the building level and in other spaces. And I'm going to adjust this next question a little bit based upon what you guys shared, because both of you talked about the importance of the policies and creating policies and procedures for students and staff to be able to have access to equity. But I'm also just thinking about the fact that, sometimes principals can get, a little stuck in their own space, right? And so, but we need the folks who are above us to be really coming alongside. And Dr. Sharon, I know that you've worked at the district level. So I'm just wondering about how have you seen, principal supervisors and, assistant superintendents, et cetera, how have you seen them supporting the efforts that you are trying to put forth at the school levels?
It's really doing the work right alongside, and that's one of the things that I took to heart when I was out of the schoolhouse and helping principals, is to be a support for them in doing the work, because I don't care what position you have, who you are, the real work is at the schoolhouse. And if you're not supporting that work, what are you doing? And so, the examining the data. And so you may not be examining and analyzing school data, but you're looking at all the schools that you're working with and then helping and being a lens for that cluster or that region, however you're divided. So you're doing the same things just on a larger scale to support that principle. That's where we fall short, I believe. When you get out, and I put that in air quotes, get out of the schoolhouse and go to central office, you soon forget the work, but you cannot. So you still have to analyze that data. You still have to create accountability to make sure that policies and things that are either systemic or school-wide you review them to ensure that they are actually closing gaps and you're not reinforcing them. You have to know who's succeeding in your area. You got to know who's struggling. And most importantly, why? Why are they succeeding? Why are they struggling? Doug Reeves has this book, The Learning Leader, which I love. And he talks about losing, lucky, learning. And you don't want to be losing or lucky. You want to be leading or you want to be learning. And so that simply means you're either succeeding and you know why, or you're not succeeding, but you know why. Because if you're anything else, lucky, meaning that you're succeeding and you have no idea why, you can't duplicate that. And you're not succeeding and you don't know why. You'll never get out of that space. And so to your question, those of individuals who are outside, who are supervisors, you need to be in the trenches with those principals, helping them do the work because the real work is at the schoolhouse.
Absolutely.
And I will echo that 100%. I don't think you are ever out of the school. You should never be out of the schoolhouse because how can you lead what you don't see? Right. And so when I was at the district level, I honestly spent a good deal of my time in the schools. And so I did a lot of work in the evenings because my time during the day was spent in the schools supporting those I supervised, counselors, social workers, as well as supporting principals when things came up in the buildings. But there's no way that you can lead and not be, in the school supporting them that way. But then also I will add to that, that for me as a district level leader, it was important to have people in the school at the table when decisions were being made. So often at central office, you have a group of people who feel like they've made it out of the schools and they sit around and make these decisions about things that they are not in touch with on the ground. And it just creates a lot of confusion and sometimes can create some animosity if we're honest. And so it's important that when decisions are being made that you bring in people from the schools so that they are part of those decisions because they are those boots on the ground. They are in touch with students and families every single day. And they have so much more information. And that's a really important piece to that puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So what do you think is needed to encourage more Black women to step into school leadership roles, but not just to step into these school leadership roles, but to step into them to lead with love and equity in their roles?
Representation and mentorship, I think, are the key. Black women, we need to see others who look like us, right? Thriving in leadership roles. But the turn is, if you are that Black woman in that leadership role thriving, you need to be intentional about sponsorship. We need to have people who can advocate for Black women in leadership pipeline. And so I think that is so important. We can't forget about other Black women who aspire to be where you are. Retention, of course, is another challenge. Many Black women in leadership face additional scrutiny. We face microaggressions and a lack of support. And that's why I love BWEL. That's why I love BWEL, because you get that connection, you get that networking and that support that so many individuals in school districts don't have. And
Mhm.
so schools and districts, I think, need to create cultures of belonging where Black women will feel valued, heard, and understood. This includes, of course, fair pay, leadership development opportunities, and spaces where we can connect with and support one another.
Amen.
Yes, you said it all, Dr. Sharon. Around the mentorship. Another thing I was going to mention was professional development, making sure people have opportunities to grow. The money is such an important aspect, and making sure that with when we talk about fair teacher pay, when you look at the disparities of Black educators and white educators, just in terms of history, right? When we think about where we've had to come from, and not having generational wealth, not having some things that have just been available to others, and having the need to increase the resources that we have for our educators. I also think that the safe spaces, affinity groups are really important, making sure that people have spaces where they can go and just, really be able to let their hair down, if you will, to just a safe space to be able to talk about things that are affecting them only with people that may really understand that plight. And I think also just making sure that, again, once you get people to a district, that you are doing everything that you can to retain them. Having the leadership, people who look like them, people who will tap into their greatness, and really do the work around that and be intentional about it. It's the intentionality and not just like a checkbox, right? What can you do to be intentional to ensure that you're bringing them in and you're intentional about retaining them as well?
Hmm. A couple of times, both of you have mentioned this idea of, making sure knowing that representation matters, and us, our children, seeing folks who look like them. And one thing that I consistently am always thinking about is, you know, when students are in school, in elementary, middle school, high school, how are we helping them to see education as a viable career option? Right? Because their folks are not just coming out of note. They have to have something, someone who is nudging them and having them think about looking into education. And that really does come from a sense of having that love, of having that sense of, wanting to provide equity. So I'm curious what you guys would think about. What do you think about how do we bring up this next generation of teachers and leaders who have this sense and bring this sense of love and equity into the schools? Either one of
Well,
you.
yeah. I was just thinking, my school district actually created a grow your own model, working with actually high school seniors as they go off to college and making a connection. I really believe we first have to go back to loving our own profession first.
Mm.
Um, you see so many, whether they're burnt out or, and I think Tasha mentioned it, just here for a paycheck, that comes off to students, and that does not interest them. These students today, this is a whole new breed, and and just the way that we carry ourselves, I think, actually, to be honest, this new crop of teachers that we have is a is a whole new breed. We have to go back to really being a true profession,
Mm.
so that it even looks appealing for young people to want to go to school to be educators. Because you're right, school of education's enrollments are low across the nation. And so we're getting, I know for my school district, many of the teachers that are coming from other industry, not even
Mm.
with the schooling educational background. So I think the first step is to go back to professionalizing our career. And one thing that I've always said during career day, we don't even highlight education. And I made sure that in my elementary schools that during career day we highlighted and elevated the work of education. So I think it stems from those of us that are currently in the position, making sure that we go back to being professionals so that it can be appealing to these young people. And also, the pay wouldn't hurt. Increasing the pay would not hurt.
For sure. Thank you.
Yes, I think we both keep going back to the pay, Dr. Sharon. We're talking about professionals who are required to have a bachelor's degree, and oftentimes, have master's degrees, right? And they're experts in their craft. And so we need to pay our educators, pay our teachers, pay everyone. I mean, not just teachers, everyone in the school system. They deserve more. So I'll say that, and I will add that the notion of leading with love and equity. I feel like if that was a course that was taught in the education programs, right? If that was something that people really, really worked on honing before going into the school buildings, before going into leadership, I truly believe that it would allow educators to connect with children on a different level that would encourage them to want to become educators. And I say that from personal experience. When I think back to my education experience, the educators who shaped me, who helped me in the most challenging times, who encouraged me when I didn't have the confidence for myself. Those are the people that I think about in terms of my journey and my trajectory, who I really wanted to be like. They modeled themselves in a certain way, and it made me want to do that too. It made me want to be able to give to a young person the same way they gave to me. And even for someone like me, coming from a very loving family, there are still so many things that they gave to me that shaped who I am today. And I always knew that it was something that each of them, and I have various names and faces in my mind, but something that each of them gave to me that wanted me, that made me feel like I wanted to be able to hand that off to someone else. And so if we could get down to that like foundational piece, I think that would really help as well around the love and equity work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. And just going into our last question, we want folks to get into this profession. What advice do you have? Just one little piece of advice, maybe, that you could offer anyone who is watching, who wants to be a stronger advocate for love and equity in their schools. What could that be?
I think they have to first do the work, educate yourself on the systemic inequities and the implicit bias that exists. Listen to your students, listen to your families. Then advocate for policy changes that support equity. Don't be afraid. We know that we are living in a political climate right now where this is not, something that people are voicing, but you have to be bold and strong and advocate for the changes that you need. Speak up when you see injustice. That's very big for me. Like if you're silent, you're going along with it, I believe. So speak up when you see things, and ensure that the curriculum that we have is inclusive and represent diverse perspectives. I can't say that enough. And depending on where you are in the world, that can be a challenge. It really can. But we have to stay committed. Equity is ongoing. It's not just one thing and you stop. It requires persistence, humility, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. So you have to be bold in this work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I do agree with Dr. Sharon, depending on where you are in the country at this time, It may look different, and you may have to figure things out. But don't give up, right? Don't give up on that. I also want to add that self-awareness is a huge part of the work. You have to know who you are, what's important to you, what you are rooted in. And so having that level of self-awareness will help you be able to know like how, what you need to do to continue to learn and to relate to others. And we talked about building those genuine connections and relationships with people. Part of that, I will add to your earlier question about how to build relationships. One of the things that has been helpful to me is being an active listener. A lot of times as educators, as leaders, as natural helpers, we go into a situation and we immediately want to start solving the problem. When people start telling us something in a conversation, we're already thinking of how we're going to respond. It is important for us to be able to be an active listener and, really take it in. Part of that actually builds relationships too, when you have that person who's actually willing to just listen without interrupting. I encourage people to lead with your heart, not just your mind. Again, as educators, we've gone through many, many years of school. And so some of us are still in school. And so we're thinking strategically. We are, thinking about lesson plans. We're thinking about all the things, right? Due dates and so forth. But leading with your heart and not just with your mind will help demonstrate that you care for people as humans and not just what the output is. I have talked about including diverse voices in decision making. That's an important piece. And then develop individual talents through coaching and mentoring. That helps build a relationship piece. But it also allows you to understand where people are great at, whether it's students, whether it is the adults that you are serving, to understand their greatness so that you can continue to cultivate that and help them lean into their strengths.
Fantastic. All of these nuggets. I hope our audience is taking notes. So go be bold, speak out, make sure that you got some support, give support. I love all of this. Ladies, it has been fantastic. I've just loved hearing so much of your perspectives. I want our audience to get to know you just a teeny bit before we end. So I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions. I'll go one at a time. And then we want to have you share just a little bit about how people can get in touch with you if they are interested in hearing more about what you do. So, but first, this is our sort of would you rather rapid fire questions, and I like this part. So this part's all me. All right. All right. I'm going to go with Tasha first. You ready?
Ready.
All right. So what's your favorite comfort food?
Oh, goodness. My favorite comfort food. I'd say pizza.
Awesome. Favorite self-care activity?
Watching movies, like just relaxing, watching movies.
Awesome. A song or a genre of music that gets you amped up for the day?
Ooh, that would have to be hip hop or R&B.
Awesome. Your favorite method for professional development?
My favorite method for professional development, I would say I like coaching. Yeah, awesome. I do like coaching.
All right. If you had a choice between a physical book, an ebook, and an audio book, where are you going?
Ooh, honestly, all of them. And quickly, I love having a book in my hand, filling the pages, but it depends on how much time I have in my life. So when I'm super busy, yes. I will turn on I will put on the audio book. So it just depends on where I'm at.
Same here. And do you have a recommendation for our audience for a leadership book that's been helpful to you?
Yes. Lead from the Outside by Stacey Abrams is a really good book. And it just gets into how people who are not in your typical power structures just really teaching you how to lead without fear of failure.
Awesome. Wonderful. All right, Dr. Sharon, here we go. Favorite comfort food?
Mashed potatoes.
Oh. Favorite self-care activity?
Oh my goodness, rest and relaxation.
Okay. Favorite song or genre to amp you up for the day?
Afrobeat all the way.
Okay, that's me too. Favorite method for PD?
I love the Grow model. Go Reality Options and Will. I love the Grow model.
I want to hear more about that one later. All right, physical, ebook, or audiobook for you?
Physical book all day.
All right. And a leadership book that you would
Yeah,
recommend to
and
the
it's so
audience?
funny because I love the Stacey Abrams book as well. So I'm going to say Dare to Lead, Brene Brown. That
I love
focuses
that
on
one.
courage, vulnerability, and then just leading with empathy and authenticity.
Yes, wonderful. Yes, I hear that one over and over and have done it, read it myself. Well, ladies, how can people get in touch with you? What are the best methods? And both of you are authors. We're all authors. Hey, we all wrote something. We published something. We got publishers on the line. But how can folks get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is the best way for me. I'm Sharon Hargrove Porter on LinkedIn. That's absolutely the best way to connect.
So,
Yes, I would have to agree. LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me as well. Tasha, spelled Taisha, Claytor, Claytor, Steele. And I look forward to connecting soon.
awesome, awesome, wonderful. All right, Jocelyn.
Well, it's been great having you guys on. And I mean, I'm sure within the last 50 minutes that we've been on that we have some great nuggets that have been shared. So for all of you who are listening, we want to definitely thank you for tuning in to us. But thank you again for listening to Lead Girl, the BWEL podcast, where we amplify the voices of Black women in educational leadership. BWEL is a nonprofit organization open for membership for you to serve and be served. And if you are a Black woman in educational leadership, we are looking for you. So become a member or support us by visiting blackwomeneducationleaders.com and follow us on social media on X, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Tune in for upcoming episodes on a variety of topics that are sure to be relevant to your personal growth and professional practice. We encourage and invite you to give us feedback or request to join our show. Email us at bwellpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media at leaders_black. See you next time. Until then, lead, girl.
You better lead.